I would like to ask you to elaborate for us. Is it at all possible, actually, to develop anti-corruption framework to systematically address corruption and clientelism in the media systems? And if so, what would be possible role of independent state institutions in this anti-corruption framework?
So with regard to the first part of it, on the strategic cooperation front and how they can better integrate media issues in anti-corruption plans or strategies, which are the main tools of the anti-corruption bodies in most states of the Balkans, I think there is space. However, the intervention needs to be done in a concerted way. In what sense? In that the media issues of clientelism, freedom, access to information, it basically touches on a lot of issues. It's an interdisciplinary issue, so it needs to be covered as such. When consultations take place, there needs to be a specific aspect of it and specific aspects for all the facets, one of them being employment. Of course, labor issues are specific to other sectors as well, so it needs to be very much well integrated into the action plans of the government in order to have results that can be tangible in the long term. And with regard to the second part of it, which regards the difficulties or the cooperation that they can have with independent institutions. Independent institutions in most of our states have a significant role in the administrative inspections and the prevention aspect that they provide for anti-corruption. I believe there is an important space for them to cooperate. Exactly because independent institutions have access to specific information, but at the same time they have limited human capacities and limited technical capacities. The media can provide for the better contact between the outside space and the information that they get, which in combination with the information that is available to independent institutions, it can become very good cases for the prevention of corruption in the long term. That is more so specific with regards to conflict of interest, which is more difficult to detect, and on which the media has much more access in evidence than independent institution oftentimes.
What to do with these very specific definitions of corruption? You pointed to some of them in your presentations, and how applicable are they to actually regard this media integrity within that framework? Can we define the corruption in the media as any behavior that is actually not in a function of public interest, but the definition of the corruption is much more precise and different, and how these differences can be overcome, if at all?
Of course, the definition provided by the study and by the working groups has been that a media that is corrupt is a media that does not fulfill its role, exactly because of the many different functions that media has for transparency, for good governance, for democracy. So, in a way, that definition makes sense research-wise and for the role of the media. However, it does not make sense on the criminalization side of it and the legal part of it. As I mentioned before, international institutions, international legal documents provide for very specific definitions of corruption, both in the private sector, in which media would probably lie in, as well as in the public sector. So really it's very difficult when there is a corruption of media or integrity in the media systems being discussed to also correlate it with the legal aspect and to provide, for example, concentration or privatization issues of media, or the ownership side, that would create a corrupt relations for the product of the media. However, it does not necessarily mean that from a legal point of view you can convict it or take it to the prosecution office. Really, it's very hard to correlate the two of them, and it needs very good information and evidence and data that one of them is linked to the other. And there needs to be also some difference between the research side and the practical side, and them coming together at some point. Because the material provided by the research and by the role of media also needs to be much more in touch with the practical side, because otherwise it's going to be very difficult for the independent institutions, prosecution in every country, to go forward with corruption in the media sector.
Do you have any ideas, just from top of your head, how could research on media integrity be improved in that sense that is more useful for independent state bodies, and that we can move forward from the research and some kind of a theory to practical resolution of problems we detected?
I think the study conducted was a very good step because it provided methodology on what are the main subsectors that need to be investigated. So ownership, for example, was investigated, and privatization processes were investigated, in public procurement. In theory, in the research side of it, you were interested in seeing mainly how that works and how that affects media. However, in practice, it is a very concrete case of maybe corruption if there was a procurement case. Because procurement came up a lot as an issue with other discussions as well, procurement of broadcasting and advertisement. It could provide and it could lead to, from the research side, to very concrete policy recommendations on the improvement of specific laws or sub-legal acts on procurement that could be of benefit to the improvement of integrity in the media.